up the fats and proteins and then allow them by their small particles to be absorbed across the bowel. Most of the absorption is done in the small intestine. Very little is absorbed from the large intestine except water. But the nutrients are absorbed through the small intestine. And then they all go to the liver, which is the largest digestive organ. It sits underneath the last few ribs here. And it actually has a lobe which comes around to the center. And it's really beautiful. If you ever get a chance to see some surgery, you ought to take a look at how beautiful the abdominal organs are, because the liver is kind of purple paisley print. Very beautiful. And underneath, if you lift up the lobe of the liver, there's this bright green gallbladder. And the gallbladder sends a duct which joins with the pancreatic duct to make the common duct here and goes into the small intestine. And this brings the bile. The bile is like a buddy system for fats. It goes into the small intestine, gets poured in from the gallbladder down into the small intestines, made in the liver, poured down. Then picks up fat buddies and slips them across the bowel wall into the bloodstream, then goes back with them to the liver, drops them off to be processed, because the liver is like a clearinghouse for all the food. Now the broccoli and cauliflower and carrots have all been broken down into their small particles, and the liver is processing them and deciding. It's like Grand Central Station. 16 carrots come in, and one goes out to the shoulder to sit for a while, and the other goes out somewhere else. And the liver stores protein there. It stores fats and so forth. And then when your body needs it, it's liberated and can be used. Fascinating, really incredibly complex mechanism. What happens, unfortunately, with the gallbladder and the bile is that when you eat too much cholesterol, this is the way cholesterol is brought into the body through the bile system. And when you eat too much cholesterol, it tends to then drop off some of its buddies in the liver, but continue. It's got too many buddies, so it brings them into the gallbladder. And you see the development of gallstones, which are made out of cholesterol, about 80% in our culture. And they come from eating animal products, from meat eating. They watched the Japanese come from when they were living in the country, most of their gallstones were bile made out of biliary, breakdown products of blood. But then they come to the city and they start eating the Western diet, and they get these cholesterol gallstones, which you see in this country. So the liver processes it, and then, of course, it's carried through the circulation. Heart sitting like this. Here we have the heart, aorta, and so forth. Lungs. We'll just draw in some of the other organs, and then I'll have him do his postures. The endocrine system, we can move on to that. We have the thyroid at the base of the throat, like a butterfly. You can see in some people, if you see them swallow, you can see the thyroid go up and down. If you put your fingers at the base of your throat, right almost to the bone, lift them up just a little bit, and then swallow, you can feel the thyroid go up and down. Or put your hands on either side. And the thyroid is like the prime minister of the endocrine system, because every cell depends on the thyroid hormone. In fact, there are at least 30 or 40, and some people say up to 100 enzymes which depend on thyroid hormone for their functioning. And if they don't get enough thyroid hormone, then they can't do their work as clearly, as effectively. Thyroid hormone determines the rate at which each cell in the body uses oxygen, and the rate at which the enzymes of the cell do their work. So you can see it's a critically important function. And it's very minute quantities we're dealing with. The body may keep the blood level of thyroid hormone steady, but still be waxing and waning according to times of day and so forth. the thyroid's like the prime minister. In the head, we have the king and queen, the pituitary and pineal. The pituitary, like the queen, determines the rate at which the thyroid functions, the prime minister. And then the pineal determines the rate at which all the hormones are being produced. And the pineal and pituitary are basically, if you go between the eyes and in through the ears, where those intersect right in the middle of the brain, there's a bony little saddle, and the pituitary sits in there, producing the hormones which control the thyroid and the adrenals. If you turn around, the excretion system, the kidneys, are kidney bean shaped here, shaped like a swimming pool, and right, like little caps sitting on top of the kidneys are the adrenals. And about 1/4, 20% to 25% of each heartbeat goes through the kidneys. So every heartbeat is constantly bathing the kidneys. And they're regulating and determining the maintenance of your seawater. Because the blood is similar in composition to seawater, and every cell is bathed in seawater. We're like little walking aquariums, little walking oceans, in order to exist on the land, as opposed to the ocean where the nutrients bathed us when we began as one cell. So this multicellular organism, the maintenance of this seawater environment is done by the kidneys. And the adrenals, which sit on top of here, produce about 30 different hormones. The most common, as adrenaline and cortisone. And these are extremely important in the maintenance of alertness. Adrenaline, when it pours into your system, gives you butterflies in the stomach as it pours into the body, gives you dilated pupils, contracted muscles, diarrhea before examinations, because you want to lighten the load. It's the fight or flight syndrome. You want to lighten the load before you run. You get rid of everything out of the bowel, and then you're ready to run. So all this is controlled here from the adrenals. They're really an important endocrine organ in our society because we're constantly calling upon them in times of stress. It's felt that before we used to experience stress in periods like this, and now it's a constant level of stress, which will do in the adrenals eventually, and they can't produce enough cortisone and adrenaline to keep the body in good harmony, in good function. So people feel tired when they wake up in the morning, and they feel tired all day. What I'd like to do now is maybe just to have him go through the different postures. Yeah. And we'll talk about how they affect the body from the standpoint of the organs I've drawn here. We should come here. We should include the spleen, which is kind of the counterpart to the liver. And the spleen has about 5 different functions, and they're mainly to do with the production and destruction of red cells and white cells, and the prevention of infection in the body. Blood sort of percolates, comes with the force of the heart down into the legs. There's a lot of pressure behind arteries. If you cut an artery, it'll spurt, whereas if you cut a vein, it just oozes. So the pressure of the heart brings the blood supply to the feet, and then it goes back up with the slow flowing veins. And the veins have one-way valves so that it doesn't fall back down, whereas the arteries don't have those valves. But really a key system that sits alongside the arteries and veins is the lymph. And the lymph, there's more lymph than there is blood. So lymph is actually really a key, more key in a way. The blood provides the oxygen to the tissues, but the lymph drains like the sewage system. And it drains slowly. There's no pressure at all behind it. It moves according to the muscles next to it. One-way valves also occur in the lymph system. And then it dumps back into the bloodstream underneath the left collarbone here, clavicle. This is the thoracic duct here of the lymph system. And it pours back into the left subclavian vein. There's a little kind of valve there, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So the lymph system determines the rate at which fluids are going to be circulating. The blood comes down into the feet, back through the veins. All the blood from the lower half of the body will go through the liver. So it's clearing and coming back from the liver up into the right side of the heart here, the first chamber over here, being the right atrium or chamber, the four-chambered heart. And so it'll come in through the superior or inferior vena cava, where it'll come from the liver up into the bloodstream here. So if there's any blockage in the liver, you see in people with cirrhosis who've scarred up the liver from alcohol use, there's a lot of swelling in the abdomen because the blood can't percolate through the liver as it should and back into the heart and circulate around. Well, we'll start out with Surya Namaskar and just get an idea from his doing of the poses how the different poses affect these organs that I've kind of talked about a little bit in terms of anatomy. I'll take this opportunity to pass around to you a couple of books which I brought. This is photography, not recommended for those of you who are faint-hearted, of cadavers. And it's just dissections which have been photographed. So you can get a really good idea. And this is also a little bit bigger book, same sort of item. Gives you precise pictures. For those of you who want to study some of how the body works, I'd really recommend this textbook. It's called A Textbook of Anatomy and Physiology. It's always best, in my mind, to put anatomy and physiology together, because instead of just the dry process of memorizing where things are, you're at the same time finding out what they do. And so the structure and function really make you able to remember and understand much better than just trying to memorize each of them separately. So this is a great introduction, very readable, and yet there's plenty of depth in it. So I'll pass this around to make sure that they come back at the end of the session. So we'll start out with Surya Namaskar, sun salutation. And the first movement is especially important to note, because as he moves back, he's counteracting what we tend to do in our lives, which is have round shoulders and lean forward. So by stretching back, the first movement opens up the lungs and gets those shoulders stretched, which is what we want to really be especially paying attention to, and preventing the development of senile kyphosis, or the permanent round shoulders that you see in old people in this country. There's another reason why we have permanent round shoulders, and that is wearing of heels on shoes. The development of wearing heels on shoes came from times when we were riding horses. We wanted a heel on the boots so the foot didn't slip through the stirrup. And yet, there's no reason why we should wear heels on shoes, except tradition. And in fact, it's not very good for the spine, because as soon as you put any kind of heel on the shoe, it makes you lean forward. And then your shoulders have to arch like this to counterbalance the pushing forward that you get. If we were meant to have heels on shoes, we would have been born with high heels attached. Okay.
What do you think
Give you a
about
workout.
running shoes that have pad and heel, is that also bad?
Well, I just from my own experience, I just started running barefoot, and it's wonderful. And in fact, in children, walking barefoot can correct some foot problems. So I think it just makes sense to avoid any kind of heel. So you get an idea, of course, of the magnitude of sun salutation and why it's such a really key pose for all the asanas. It gives you work on the entire body, on the entire spine, on all the sections of the organs. You see they're all being stimulated like that. So probably go on to Cobra. I recommend 6 sun salutations. It rhymes too. And doing them very, very slowly is interesting. If you do it very slowly, it really calms the mind. So, Cobra is great for, again, doing exactly, taking those shoulders and pulling them back. It's very important to hold Cobra for a while. And allowing the lungs, you can see the lungs to expand fully. We'll hold it for a minute, Sajjan. The lungs are like little bunches of grapes. And half of the grapes are kind of folded up. You can see the thyroid being stretched in this position also. But what we have when we expand the lungs fully is the grapes then get full of air, the alveoli they're called. And more of them being full of air, this kind of exchange can occur between the blood and the air. So you get more oxygen into the system. So, very good. It's a temptation in this position to use this part of the back, which is more flexible, than this part of the back, which is less flexible. So it's very important not to straighten the elbows and bend from the mid-waist, but to have your students really keep their elbows bent and concentrate here, because this is what is needed. There are other poses which work on this. The bow pose will work on the mid-back. But if you also can use this position to work on the upper back, that's very important. So even not coming all the way up into the pose. Why don't you try it again, Sajjan, to show them. But just concentrating here and holding that, that's as far as you need to go if people aren't very flexible. And then if you can continue up, not just about to that position will give you more of a stretch and be more important than to come up and then focus here and straighten out this one. So he's pretty flexible in either position. So Salabhasana, locust. Salabhasana is a good one to work on twice a day because it's really common to be quite stiff in the morning, but in the evening you can get more of different kind of benefits from Salabhasana. So coming up this far, and then in the evening you can come up this far. And you see the full Salabhasana gives the entire spine quite a stretch. It also brings the blood supply to the face. You can see he's getting a little red in the face here. And you can work on each vertebra, the flexibility of each vertebra. So that's an inspiration to work on.
I don't know how long it takes them to get like that, right?
Just a few months daily. The best thing with the poses, if you want to get more flexible, is to do them twice a day. Because in the morning one is going to be stiff. The reason we're stiff in the morning is because during sleep, carbon dioxide and lactic acid build up in the tissue. And this makes you stiff, and you have to squeeze it to move it along. But in the evening, there's going to be more flexibility.
Is there any particular time of the day that's good? depend on when you eat?
It depends on when you eat. If you want to do it just some before supper if you have time, or eat supper and then wait a couple of hours and do some just before bed. Just the ones that you're really working on in terms of flexibility. It'll be really helpful. Feel great and sleep better. So you could see in that pose what it did to his kidneys. You want to do it again, son?
The full or the...
Or just come up partway. But partway gives some stimulation to the kidneys. But if you come up all the way, you watch what you're doing to your kidneys there. Really giving tremendous circulation improvement. What asanas do is they work in two ways. One is by giving a circulatory massage. By putting the body in different positions, blood flows, for example, in that position to the face. It's great for the complexion. For the brain also, more blood supply there. And then the second way is by a physical massage, by squeezing the tissue, by turning the body into different positions. It squeezes the tissue, and this gets better circulation. Wherever there's better circulation, the body can work better. Because in physiology, in medical school, we learn oxygen is the currency of the body. Each cell spends oxygen according to what kind of cell it is, whether it's a digestive cell or a hair cell or foot cell or whatever it is. It will spend oxygen. So the universal currency of the cells is oxygen. And by putting the body into different positions like this, more blood supply goes to a certain area. More blood, more oxygen. Wherever the more blood supply goes, the body can heal itself better. That's why if you get an infection in your finger, you soak it in hot water, because that draws the blood supply there, which then heals the infection. Not because the hot water itself is doing anything, but it's just drawing the blood supply. So next, bow pose.
Why is it on these back-bending poses that there is a real strain on the heart, increased heartbeat in these poses, as opposed to the feet are still up in the air and in the shoulder stand, and where the blood is being drained away from the feet? Why is it such a drain and strain on the heart?
Well, because it's putting the body into a position which it's just not used to. It's muscular work. So the heart beats in order to keep up with the muscular work. Yeah, it's not as much work to lean forward or to do even to do a shoulder stand, although some people in the beginning, when they're pushing up, their heart beats rapidly when they're not used to the shoulder stand. So if you go into bow, you can see it also is working on the kidneys too. But the main effect of bow pose is on the digestive organs. And drawing circulation to the pancreas is going to do a variation for you. That's a great variation. That's a lot more difficult than it looks. Isn't that beautiful? Yay. Just like a flower. Okay, hold it for a minute. Now, if you could see the rest of his liver under there, he's getting a good massage to the liver, spleen, pancreas. We've had a patient who, just by doing bow pose, and he wouldn't follow any of the diet recommendations we made, got better control of his diabetes. It's a simple drawing circulation, drawing and giving a massage to the stomach. I mean, you know how good massage makes us feel. Well, we can't always get a massage. We can't always find somebody who will give us one. We can give ourselves a massage like this. And if you rock back and forth a little, you can see how good a massage to the bowel, digestive tract, liver, spleen, pancreas, stomach.
When you're talking about massaging the organs or, increasing circulation, do they first get the blood squeezed